Hello, I'm Maria Titizian.
And I'm Rubina Margosian, and this is the Week in Review.
Every week, we bring you the stories shaping Armenia and the region.
From politics and policy to social issues and conflict, we break down the news and what it means for you.
This week in the news, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance makes a historic visit to Armenia, announcing major defense and nuclear deals and sparking controversy over a deleted tweet. Armenia publicly showcases weapons purchased from India for the first time, and Azerbaijani civil society representatives enter Armenia via the newly demarcated section of the shared border. These stories and more in our weekly roundup of the news.
U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance visited Armenia this week in the highest-level trip ever made by a sitting U.S. official to the country, signaling a significant expansion of bilateral ties at a moment of geopolitical realignment in the South Caucasus. The U.S. Embassy described the visit as historic, while Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan called it a truly historic milestone, reflecting the depth of the growing U.S.-Armenia strategic partnership. During talks in Yerevan, Pashinyan thanked President Donald Trump for hosting last August's Washington summit and said Armenia and Azerbaijan are nearing what he called an irreversible peace, with implementation of the TRIP framework now the central task. Several major announcements followed. Pashinyan confirmed that Armenia has acquired U.S.-made V-BAT drones, marking the first major American arms sale to Armenia. He said the system, valued at $11 million, would significantly strengthen Armenia's defense capabilities. Vance framed the sale as part of a broader deterrence strategy, saying that the best way to ensure peace is to establish real deterrence, and the advanced U.S. military technology would help secure long-term stability. The two leaders also signed a joint statement completing negotiations on the 123 agreement for peaceful nuclear cooperation. According to Vance, the deal could unlock up to $5 billion in initial U.S. exports to Armenia, with an additional $4 billion in long-term fuel and maintenance contracts, paving the way for American companies to enter Armenia's civil nuclear sector. Beyond defense and nuclear energy, Pashinyan said both countries are committed to cooperating on critical minerals and rare earth supply chains. Vance also announced that Washington has issued export licenses for the sale of high-powered NVIDIA chips, potentially boosting Armenia's growing tech sector. TRIP featured prominently in the discussions. Vance said the framework would transform regional trade, transit, and energy connectivity, arguing that economic interdependence is essential for lasting peace.
Well, following the meeting, Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan met with NVIDIA Vice President Rev Lebaridian to discuss the Firebird data center. Firebird announced the same day that Phase 2 of its AI mega project, securing U.S. export licensing and regulatory approvals for the sale and delivery of an additional 41,000 NVIDIA GPUs to Armenia. The company said the expanded cluster marks a major milestone, positioning Armenia as home to one of the world's top 5 largest AI GPU clusters, with the $4 billion dollar project representing one of the most significant technology-driven capital investments in the country's history. It was interesting, right? Like all of these things that were happening. I mean, we were watching, and it was like, oh, the drones, oh, the chips, oh, the it was.
It was all of it was kind of expected, but maybe not as soon.
Yet, and it wasn't. It was a weird time, and there was. And we'll talk about how he was in Baku, but in Yerevan, you could feel there was a lot of warmth between the two leaders. I mean, Vance and Pashinyan, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It was interesting. Anyway, we'll get to that in a bit. But
nothing goes without some controversy. The warmth subsided at one moment.
And it went strong for a minute there, didn't it? It's still going strong.
Because Vance's visit was widely covered by international media, but mostly not for the visit itself, rather than for a deleted tweet about his visit to the Genocide Memorial. In Armenia, Vice President Vance visited the Genocide Memorial with his wife. He first tweeted about the visit with the phrase Armenian genocide. The tweet was later deleted, prompting confusion and anger, because this was kind of a narrative that was already in circulation before his visit, because opposition media and some questionable media organizations were saying he's not going to visit because
the memorial.
The memorial, because the government had taken the visit the memorial out of the schedule, and all of this was being discussed widely before his visit. Then this tweet happens.
then he visits, and then it was like, yeah, you see, guys. I mean, of course he's going to visit the genocide memorial. And then when I saw the tweet, I was surprised because he was very forthcoming. And then what was it, like 2 hours later, the tweet is deleted.
Well, his office said the tweet was posted in error by staff who are not part of the delegation. Right. Blaming the staff has become a thing. While he was at the EVN Airport, Vance was asked why he had visited the memorial. He said Armenian officials had told him the site was very important to them, and that as the first U.S. vice president to visit Armenia, he had been asked to go there. He described the events that occurred more than a century ago as a terrible tragedy and said the visit was intended as a sign of respect for the victims, the Armenian people, and the government, which he described as an important regional partner, as well as for Prime Minister Pashinyan himself. This snippet was first posted by the White House-linked official account, but was similarly deleted. Right. Well, eventually, the only official mention of the visits to the genocide memorial that has not been removed so far is a post by Vance's press secretary, which simply reads that Vance and his wife laid flowers at the eternal frame and signed a guest book on the final day of their visit to Armenia.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, I don't even... Anyway, maybe we just move on. Well, from Yerevan, Vance traveled to Azerbaijan for talks with President Ilham Aliyev. In Baku, they signed a charter on a strategic partnership, and it outlines cooperation in regional connectivity, economic investment, and security. In his opening remarks, Aliyev said, because we were watching it obviously as it was happening, that he values his relations with Washington. And he said that the past months, 6 months especially, have been very positive for bilateral ties. Vance said that President Trump was proud of brokering a peace deal between Armenia and Azerbaijan and criticized the previous U.S. administration's policy toward Baku, saying it has since been corrected. The charter's economic... And Nerses all the time has said this, right? Even in his writings, Kopalian, that for Aliyev, any relationship with Trump was like of paramount importance to him, right? So this was his way of being part of that trajectory in his mind, I guess. Well, the Charter's economic provisions called for expanded cooperation in AI, digital infrastructure, potential space industry partnerships, maybe the development of AI data centers in Azerbaijan. Anyway, so it was mostly those kinds of discussions. And during the joint press statements, Aliyev said that since August 8, Armenia and Azerbaijan had effectively been living in peace and were learning to coexist peacefully. Vance described their ties as an underappreciated but important partnership and said that Washington would supply patrol boats to help Azerbaijan protect its territorial waters, that's in the Caspian Sea. And Aliyev said this is opening a new chapter in defense cooperation. Now, but it was really interesting because when he was in Yerevan, Vance said that when he announced the drones to Armenia, which was a huge thing because this is advanced American technology for the first time ever, he emphasized military deterrence. He said, in order to achieve peace, you need to be able to have deterrence. In Baku, he stressed cultural exchange as a way to prevent conflict. So right off, you were able to see that difference. He also said Aliyev was among the few world leaders who maintain strong relations with both Turkey and Israel, and he said this is very important for DC. And he ended his remarks with a joke, saying that, they had met Aliyev's wife and they found out that she was also the vice president of Azerbaijan. And he said, I hope the second his wife, doesn't get any ideas from Mehriban being vice president.
What concerns me in this, most of all, is that they didn't know before arriving in Baku.
I mean, the way he said it, right? But it was interesting. State TV in Azerbaijan deleted that part because it was kind of done in jest, I think. Anyway.
Well, there were several narratives that were discussed before and after this trip that didn't necessarily have to do with strategic partnership, charters, and arms sales. And one of those issues, very important for Armenia, is the issue of the Armenian detainees held in Baku. And it did draw significant attention both ahead and during the visit. As I said, there were expectations that at least some of the detainees, particularly civilians, might be released following or because of due to this visit. In Yerevan, Vance told reporters that the issue is certainly going to come up during his Baku trip. His office confirmed that Vance and Aliyev discussed confidence-building measures such as the release of prisoners, but we have not heard any news yet.
Well, because I think the other thing that also led us to think that this might happen was that they were sort of quickly they handed down sentences to
almost all to 18 of the detainees and POWs.
So we thought, okay, this is what happened last time. So I was really secretly hopeful that we would get a few back home, but unfortunately not yet. Anyways, and last week, all of the detainees in Baku, like I said, except for Ruben Vartanian, got their sentences, and it was anywhere from 20 years to life imprisonment. Vartanian's trial is nearing conclusion. That was also for me interesting, right?
Into timing, right?
Yeah. So this week he delivered his closing remarks, after which the judges withdrew to deliberate a verdict, which I found to be comical because we all know that these are sham trials. You know, I don't know what they need to deliberate. We all know what the outcome is going to be. But Vartanian later spoke by phone with family members from prison, conveying the substance of his final court statement. Refusing to participate in what he described as an imitation of justice, he instructed his lawyer not to present a defense and called the proceedings a judicial farce, saying there had been no genuine opportunity for a fair trial. In his remarks, Vartanian spoke about dignity, responsibility, peace, arguing that lasting peace is only possible between equal sides. And he warned that humiliation would prevent reconciliation. He said he wasn't afraid, whatever sentence they handed down, and he expressed hope that in his lifetime, the leaders of the conflict's three sides, and here I guess he means Artsakh, Armenia, and Azerbaijan, would one day jointly honor the victims and seek forgiveness from grieving families. He also reiterated that for him, Artsakh has existed and will exist, and describing it as an existential rather than a legal reality.
And meanwhile, a group of Azerbaijani civil society representatives have arrived in Armenia, crossing the land border at the demarcated section of the Armenia-Azerbaijan border.
This is the first time, that has happened in 30 years.
They have flown here before,
but
not crossing the land border. Because the crossing is not open for regular border traffic, Armenia's border guards had set up a mobile passport control point, and the Azerbaijani delegation's passports were stamped on site. This is kind of emphasized here because there was kind of this old talk about that they just walked in, their passports weren't stamped.
I really wish people would wait to get official confirmation before they started talking.
The visit is part of the Peace Bridge initiative, under which a bilateral roundtable is scheduled to take place in Armenia. Discussions are expected to focus on the peace agenda endorsed at by the August 8 Washington summit, regional security, architecture, economic cooperation, public perceptions of inter-societal relations, and the role of civil society in confidence-building efforts. This marks the third visit by Azerbaijani civil society members to Armenia. Earlier in November, and a group of Armenian civil society representatives had visited Baku for the first time.
Yeah, and they were there at the border to greet their Azerbaijani counterparts. At least that's what we saw in the photos. Now, as Armenia deepens ties with the United States and the European Union, Russia is seeking to maintain its engagement in the region. Commenting on the U.S. proposal to supply modular nuclear reactors, Russian Security Council Secretary Sergei Shoigu said no American SMR, small modular reactor, has yet been built or licensed for commercial use, calling any Armenian project an untested experiment in a seismically active country. He added that Armenia's Metsamor nuclear power plant withstood the 1988 earthquake due to its Soviet-era design and has operated reliably for decades. Shoigu also said that spent nuclear fuel from U.S. reactors would likely remain stored in Armenia because the United States lacks commercial reprocessing facilities. He noted that Armenia is aware of competing proposals from Russia's state nuclear company Rosatom, which he described as offering proven technologies, and expressed hope that decisions would be based on national interests rather than politics.
Speaking of Rosatom, last week the head of Rosatom, Alexei Likhachev, met Armenian Parliament Speaker Alan Simonian to discuss current and future nuclear cooperation. Likhachev briefed him on progress in extending the operational life of the Metsamor nuclear power plant, where Rosatom is working on a project to keep the facility running until 2036. He also presented proposals for building new nuclear units in Armenia, ranging from small to large capacity. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Galuzhin later said Rosatom is ready to begin implementing a new nuclear power plant project in Armenia in the shortest possible time frame, taking Yerevan's preferences into account. Pashinyan, meanwhile, told Parliament that Armenia may extend the operation of its sole nuclear power plant until 2046. He said key decisions on a new facility must be made during that period, and noted that discussions are underway with multiple partners, including Russia, the United States, France, China, and South Korea, with final choices to be based on economic feasibility and long-term affordability.
Yeah, I don't know how often how we can keep extending the life of Metsamor, right? First, it was set to be decommissioned in 2036, and now Pashinyan is talking about maybe extending it to 2046. It's going to be interesting to see if that's possible. Well, speaking of Russia, Russia is set to launch substantive talks with Armenia on restoring 2 short railway segments in the country. This was said by Russia's Deputy Prime Minister, Alexei Overchuk. This move would reconnect Armenia's rail network with those of Azerbaijan and Turkey. It follows a formal request from the Armenian side. Overchuk emphasized that the decision reflects friendly and fraternal feelings toward the Armenian people and builds on Russia's expertise in railway infrastructure. I'm just wondering why this hasn't been done until now.
Because they had the option of not doing it.
The sections targeted for restoration are relatively short. One is approximately 1.6 kilometers long and the other 12.4 kilometers. I mean, come on. Anyway, they would enable connections between Armenian railways and Azerbaijan's network near Yeras, as well as with Turkey's railway near the settlement of Ahurian.
Meanwhile, Prime Minister Pashinyan emphasized that Armenia does not pursue policies against Russia, but will make foreign policy decisions based on its own national interests. In an interview with public television, he addressed Russia's concerns over Armenia's foreign policy, including efforts to strengthen ties with the European Union. Pashinyan said no one could draw Yerevan into actions directed against Russia, adding that he maintains direct and warm relations with Russian President Vladimir Putin and Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin. He also noted that for 5 years, Armenia has proposed to Russia the same principles later reflected in the August 8 Washington Agreement: territorial integrity, sovereignty, jurisdiction, reciprocity, and the inviolability of borders. Yerevan has been ready to sign a document containing these principles at any time. Pashinyan reiterated that while Armenia will not act against Russia, it cannot act against its own national interests.
Well, we've been talking about this for weeks, months, Rup. More progress has been reported toward a partial opening of the Armenia-Turkey border. Now, we keep saying it.
Yes, we keep saying this.
Well, according to Turkish media reports, intensive efforts are underway to make the Margara Alican crossing fully operational. The governor of Iktir has inspected the site, and earlier, writing for Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, Garo Paylan, who is a former member of Turkish parliament, who we've interviewed here at EVN Report, suggested that Ankara is expected to open the border to Armenia for third-party citizens and diplomatic passport holders in March. Now, during Vance's visit, Pashinyan also addressed the issue, saying that in the context of regional peace, it is of great importance to bring the Armenia-Turkey normalization dialogue to a logical conclusion, including reopening the Gyumri-Kars railway.
And Turkey and Armenia have also, and this is actual new, like tangible news at this point almost, Turkey and Armenia have also agreed to allow direct bilateral land trade via Georgia, removing the decades-old re-export mechanism. This is reported by Al Monitor this week. Previously, land trade between Turkey and Armenia had to go through Georgia, with Turkish goods reclassified as separate exports upon entering Georgia. Now shipments will keep their original export status in transit, allowing direct trade without relying on Georgian intermediaries or the reopening of the closed border, although it will most likely take time for companies to change existing arrangements.
And more in diplomacy, Armenia and Iran plan to sign a comprehensive strategic cooperation document during Prime Minister Pashinyan's visit to Tehran later this year. Iran's ambassador to Armenia said this. Yerevan and Tehran agreed to upgrade ties during President Masoud Pezeshkian's visit last August. In a congratulatory message marking the anniversary of the Iranian Revolution, Pashinyan said Armenia attaches importance to deepening strategic relations with Iran and expressed confidence the two countries would expand cooperation across multiple sectors through new joint initiatives. And there was also a lot of chatter about Iran's reaction to Vance's visit to Armenia. And of course, this is a very sensitive topic and oftentimes weaponized. But Iran did say that all sides know what their position is, and they didn't come out with any
new position
or harsh statements. Yeah.
Well, Armenia has for the first time publicly showcased weapons purchased from India since launching its defense diversification campaign. The display took place during the visit of the Chief of the Defense Staff of the Indian Armed Forces to Yerevan last week, where samples of both Armenian and Indian-produced weaponry were presented. Days later, Defense Minister Suren Papikyan also released footage of the extensive fortification work along the border, highlighting intensified efforts in recent years to strengthen security, including the construction of fortified zones and major engineering projects. Maria, you've been, you've seen, you've visited.
Very impressive. It was very impressive. And if you remember when I came back,
yes, I
said, this is the first time I felt, not to be naive or overly optimistic, but I felt safer. Because when you see how it's fortified, it's like, oh my God, there are no more tires or bags of sand, right? There's no more like dugout trenches where the soldiers have to sleep in the mud and the cold and whatever. It was just, and also very frustrating. Why hadn't we done this before, earlier? But yeah, no. And they're saying that most of now I don't know this for sure, but along the new border now that we have with Azerbaijan, that the entire border will be fortified in that manner. So we'll see.
Well, we don't know to what extent it's progressed, and we, as journalists, also know that there are also always this, sample sections where journalists and others are allowed to visit to be impressed. So
right. So they took us to Davush. So if you remember, I was saying I'd like to go see them in Sunik, right? Because they're taking everybody to a particular spot. Yeah. Anyway, we'll see.
Well, back to the video, even though you described it.
Yeah.
Well, the video shows underground reinforced concrete defensive structures in high mountain areas designed to be concealed from direct observation. The fortifications include interconnected trenches and firing positions intended to secure both frontline and rear areas, and are built to withstand drone threats while enabling circular defense depending on the terrain. Well, Papikyan said several dozen such fortifications have already been built in the recent years, and that similar structures are planned along the entire length of Armenia's state border to reinforce territorial integrity. As you said, Maria, he described the project as a significant achievement for the armed forces aimed at improving soldier protection and providing psychological advantage, adding that the new positions differ substantially from previous defense approaches in both structure and capability.
Yeah, speaking of soldier protection, I mean, they had they even had like a little kitchen. They had rooms where they could sleep, where they could rest, all under that fortification. And I think even a tank could go in. It was pretty impressive. But I guess I should stop talking about it. Okay. Well, Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan this week issued new accusations against the Armenian Apostolic Church, alleging that shadow funds are entering Armenia through church-related channels for political purposes. He said authorities have information about such financial flows, but that it is still being verified. Pashinyan also claimed that the Mother See is trying to position itself as a foreign state within Armenia, and compared the rhetoric of some senior clergy to extremist movements. He said that since 2020, increasingly radical political messages have appeared in church sermons, and argued the church should not take part in domestic politics, pointing to past calls by senior clerics for his resignation and the political movement launched by Archbishop Bagrat Galistanian. He added that the church cannot be a state within a state. Pashinyan said these developments raise concerns about national sovereignty and security, and called for a church reform agenda focused on ethical standards, financial transparency, and accountability. The remarks mark the third time in roughly 9 months that Pashinyan has publicly advanced claims concerning Catholicos Garekin II. Earlier, he alleged the Catholicos had violated church celibacy rules, and later claimed that the Catholicos and his brother, who's the archbishop in Moscow, were acting as foreign agents.
And a group of prominent diasporan Armenians have issued an open letter criticizing Prime Minister Pashinyan's handling of the government's dispute with the Armenian Apostolic Church and calling for respect for the church's self-governance. The signatories said escalating tensions between state authorities and church leadership, including calls to remove the Catholicos and the detention of several senior clerics and Samvel Garapetyan, who publicly supported the church, risk deepening divisions between Armenia and its global diaspora. The letter urges that all matters related to the church governance be addressed through the church's internal structures, including next week's Synod of Bishops and the National Ecclesiastical Assembly, which is the body authorized to elect the Catholicos and amend church rules. The authors also warned that continued political interference would damage Armenia's relationship with diaspora communities, many of whom rely on the church as a central cultural and spiritual institution. They call on both the government and church authorities to de-escalate the dispute and resolve differences through dialogue. The letter was signed by Nubar Rafeyan, Anthony Barsamian, Lord Aradarsi of Denham, Eric Israelian, Vahe Gabraj, Vache Manukyan, Joseph Ughurlian, and Berj Setrakian.
And speaking of the church, Bishop Mgrdich Borosyan has been released from pretrial detention and placed under house arrest. He had been in custody since October of last year. The case was initiated by the investigative committee following claims by Father Aram Asadarian, a priest from Hovanavank, that he took part in the 2021 opposition protests on the instruction of a superior rather than by choice.
Meanwhile, investigators have charged 7 opposition figures with directing voters to support the Victory Alliance and obstructing the free exercise of electoral rights during the November 2025 municipal elections in Varashapat. This is Echmiadzin. The Victory Alliance consists of the Armenian Revolution Federation and the Arach parties. The investigative committee says wiretaps indicate voters were instructed how to vote and, in some cases, transported to and from polling stations. Criminal proceedings have been launched for coordinated obstruction of electoral rights. 6 individuals have been detained, and searches at their homes reportedly uncovered documents linked to the investigation. The Victory Alliance finished second behind the ruling Civil Contract Party in the Varashapat election with 32% of the vote. Sevak Khachaturian, head of the alliance's council faction, questioned the authenticity of the recordings and described the law enforcement actions as political persecution ahead of parliamentary elections.
Well, speaking of searching, the law enforcement carried out a search at the Izmirlian Medical Center as part of a criminal investigation into alleged tax evasion and money laundering, including suspected links to senior clergy. Investigators believe the center purchased, this is the medical center, Izmirlian, purchased supplies between 2015 and 2025 from companies allegedly connected to senior figures of the Armenian Apostolic Church at above market prices, generating large profits that were later allegedly laundered. The investigation was launched in October 2025, but investigative actions only began 4 months later. Armen Charchian, who is the director of the Izmirlia Medical Center and a former opposition lawmaker, received a suspended prison sentence in 2024 in an unrelated case involving alleged coercion of employees to participate in the 2021 parliamentary elections. Those are charges that he denied. And we all know that, I mean, that's what I've heard, right? That Izmirlian was under the church's authority. So, yet another.
Right, but in the previous case, there was a video that showed him how he was saying that if you're patriots, you vote for the opposition because my grandchildren's future depends on it. It's overall about something like that. And more about detentions and searches. Former senior police officials have been charged in the March 1 case, the Anti-Corruption Committee said this week. The charges target the former commander of the Yerevan Police Patrol Regiment and his deputy for organizing the dispersal of peaceful demonstrators at Freedom Square on March 1, 2008, when police used force and special measures. I remember this day very well. There were so many tents and people had been sleeping there for days and days, and then one morning we woke up and they just cleared away very brutally. At the time, the regiment commander was Robert Melkonian, known as Bazaz, and his deputy was Valery Osipian. Osipian we all know from so many instances from our youth political life in Yerevan. Following the 2018 revolution, Osipian was appointed Armenia's police chief. However, he resigned not long after.
And Armenia's parliament adopted a bill allowing citizens aged 27 to 37 who evaded mandatory military service to avoid criminal charges. The law offers several options for those wanted for draft evasion, such as voluntary return to Armenia and 24 months of military service, or 12 months of service plus a 2.5 million dirham, or about $6,800 US dollar payment to the state budget, 6 months of service plus a 5 million dirham, and it goes on like this, a 1 month of service plus an 8 million dirham payment, or full exemption from military service in exchange for 15 million Armenian dirhams, which is about 40,000 US dollars.
It's a whole menu.
It is a menu that you could choose from depending on your budget.
Well, and good news. Good news. YouTube monetization will be activated in Armenia in late April or early May. High-Tech Minister Mekhitar Hayrapetyan reported this. The statement followed the first Armenia-US Technology and Innovation Summit held in Yerevan, where representatives of major Armenian tech companies participated. Hayrapetyan welcomed YouTube's decision, saying it would strengthen Armenia's digital economy, support the country's growing community of content creators, and increase the global visibility of Armenian content and culture. He added that the ministry plans to continue cooperation with international technology partners to further integrate Armenian creators and companies into the global digital ecosystem. We hope PayPal will be fully functional for Armenia as well. And this is good news because as also media organizations, it's good to have the option if we ever need it.
If we ever needed it, yeah. Well, as always, every week we're going to be doing an election sort of digest of what happened because we are heading into elections. Samvel Garabedian's political party says it will seek constitutional amendments to allow him to become prime minister. This announcement was made by his nephew, Narek Garabedian, who named him the Strong Armenia Party's prime ministerial candidate at the party's founding Congress. Let's take a step back. So, Merzevov, which was
a movement. Established a party.
Right, and they've been talking under that banner, Merzevov. Now they've established a political party called Ujer Hayastan, or Strong Armenia, and they had this big event.
And so far they were saying we're having our inaugural event, and the name of our candidate will be announced after
so they kept everyone in tension for 2 hours until Narek Garabedian, who's the nephew of Samvel Garabedian, got up and said that Samvel will be our prime ministerial candidate. The Russia-based tycoon holds both Russian and Armenian citizenship and has not permanently resided in Armenia over the past 4 years. And all of these disqualify him from serving, first of all, as an MP or even a prime minister. The law, however, does not prohibit his inclusion on the party's election list. So, I mean, you could be on the list, but you're not qualified. I mean, something is either wrong with the law or with the party.
Common logic would imply that if you don't qualify, you don't apply.
Why would you? Yeah, so he's their selling point, right? So, Narek Karapetyan said the party would propose amendments at the first session of the newly elected parliament, which they believe they will have the majority of, allowing any Armenian citizen to become prime minister, adding that by then his uncle would hold only Armenian citizenship. So Samvel Karapetyan would give up his Russian citizenship, they would change the constitution, they would win the election so that Samvel Karapetyan would become prime minister.
I'm just thankful they're not thinking that they're amending the constitution to extend that a non-Armenian citizen can keep
why not at this point?
Why not give up the Russian
Constitution has
citizenship?
become
Maybe
like a
keep
piece
the
of
Russian
cloth,
and
yeah.
while you're doing all of this, just amend it in a way that you keep your Russian citizenship.
Okay, so just for the record, Article 148 of Armenia's constitution says a member of government must meet the requirements set for a member of parliament. Article 48 states that a candidate for the National Assembly must be at least 25 years of age, have held only Armenian citizenship for the previous 4 years, have permanently resided in Armenia during that period, possesses voting rights, and be proficient in Armenian. Now, during the event, which I found surprising anyway, human rights lawyer Siranush Sahagyan delivered a video address outlining the constitutional amendment framework. The Constitution stipulates 3 regimes: non-amendable provisions, changes requiring a referendum, and amendments that may be adopted by the National Assembly. She noted that Article 148 is not among the non-amendable provisions and does not require a referendum. Therefore, Parliament will be able to make that change in the Constitution. They don't need to go to referendum. Now, Samvel Karapetyan is currently under house arrest and has been charged with making public calls to seize power and overthrow the constitutional order. In an AI-generated video message, they have to stop with this AI.
They're really big fans of AI-generated
content. Not only them, everybody. To the Congress, Karapetyan expressed confidence that the country's ruling small clique would be voted out of office. Take it away, Rube.
This is going to be interesting to follow all these developments because it already took a little bit more absurdist turn than we expected, in all of this. We were joking.
Many more surprises ahead.
We were joking about it just because the law doesn't allow someone who's already deceased to be on the list. If we could just do that as well and see what happens.
Have the whole gamut.
Well. Businessman Gagik Tsarukyan will run in the upcoming parliamentary elections without forming alliances, with his Prosperous Armenia party participating independently. This is according to his spokesperson. The party's congress is scheduled for March, when the names of the first 30 candidates on Prosperous Armenia's pre-election list are expected to be announced. Tsarukyan has also presented his proposal for Armenia on social media platforms, describing it as a supra-political civic initiative aimed at uniting citizens, experts, and public figures around post-war recovery and economic development. He framed the project as a political Noah's Ark, an inclusive format intended to gather policy ideas and professional expertise beyond party lines, and said the party's election team would be formed on the basis of competence and public participation rather than political bargaining.
Armenia's Central Electoral Commission has announced the official campaign period for the upcoming parliamentary elections will kick off on May 8. It will run until June 5, with voting election day being June 7. Parties and alliances seeking to participate must submit electronic applications to obtain an account with the Commission between February 9 and April 23. So if you want to run, Rubina, this is your window of opportunity. Registration documents are to be filed from April 13 to the 23rd, while electoral lists will be registered afterward. The order... So anyway, there's a whole bunch of details.
I can run, Maria, but only with Samvel Karapetyan's party.
Why?
Because I haven't given up my Lebanese citizenship yet, so it's the only chance I have.
Your passport's expired, no?
Yes, unfortunately.
But you're still a citizen,
I am a
technically.
citizen, but if I run with Strong Armenia, I might have a chance.
No.
They'll change the
No,
constitution.
but he's giving up his Russian citizenship.
I know, but I still have a window to give up my Lebanese citizenship and make
There
it
you
to
go.
Parliament.
I'll give up my Canadian. And then whatever. If you want, we'll start a party. Okay. No,
You said it on record.
No, I didn't. It was a joke. Gosh. Okay. So, as always, let's talk about the articles, Rubina, instead of talking about political parties.
Maybe not just the articles. How about the It Has to Be Said section?
Sure. Oh, okay. Yes, we did publish our It Has to Be Said short video explainer. And this week, it's about shifting regional order in the South Caucasus and how, just very briefly about J.D. Vance's back-to-back visits to Yerevan and Baku, and just the deals that were made, but also how to achieve peace. I mean, if you don't have a reliable partner in peace, and with Azerbaijan, America can come in, and Brussels can come in, and Moscow can come in, and everybody can come to the country and say, to the region, and say, you have to have peace. But unless the two sides are committed to peace, then it's not going to happen.
Well, it's an editorial section.
It's
it's
what I felt about it.
Yes. Well, but also, we just today published another article about J.D. Vance's visit to Armenia and Azerbaijan. It's called Strategic Partnership in Motion. Let me repeat myself. J.D. Vance's visit to Armenia and Azerbaijan is by Sosi Tatikian and typical to her style, and this is how she works.
In depth.
In depth. She dissects all the aspects of this visit from both sides, including the rhetoric, including the sentiment, but also in depth the sale of weapons or military collaboration, nuclear collaboration, and everything that was said and done on both sides.
Yep.
It's
one of the most comprehensive pieces. Typical.
It's a 10-page. The reading it is longer than the press conferences that we hear. But it's if anything puts everything in perspective and organizes it on a page. It's Sosi's piece.
And then we had a column by Sheila Palin, Lent but Fabulous. Lent is starting this Sunday, and it's a personal, kind of a funny reflection on Lent, and she reframes it not as a joyless deprivation, because, right, I mean, when I was growing up, my mother, we couldn't have meat on Wednesdays and Fridays. We had to give up something we loved. I hated Lent, to be honest. Because
I'm vegetarian. I love it. Finally, the menus change in Yerevan, and I have more options than I usually do.
So she's saying, let's reframe it not as this joyless time where we have to deprive ourselves, but as a disciplined transformation. Anyway, so it was, again, typical of a Sheila piece. So that was lovely.
We did have one article this week that was not typical of its writer, Mikhail Zolyan's piece about Arad 73 and apricot socialism. Well, the reason for him wanting to write this piece or proposing this piece is this movie that's coming up about soon to premiere in Yerevan about Arad 73, and there's a lot of discussion around this film because it's a Russian production, and a lot of people are saying it's kind of soft power thing. But what Mikhail does is basically takes a look at what Arad 73 or what the football team was. How it came to be and where it fell within the Soviet policies of the time, and how and how it became this vessel for Soviet republics to express some nationalism, and what joy it brought to
it
the
was
people
a very
at
sentimental
the time.
piece, and people have really reacted to it. Then we had a piece by Sona Karaborosyan. She's our sort of resident film critic, and it's called Not All Films Are About Love. And so she looks back at the 2025 year in film, and she traces how global cinema engages with gender, grief, revenge, and political catastrophe, from Gaza to migration, and questions trends, festival politics. She loves doing that, right? She's always all about the festival politics.
Because all festivals have most festivals have become highly political.
Even buying tomatoes is political these days. And also what films reveal about the world we live in. So it's a lovely piece by Sona.
And last but not least, a piece by a first-time author for us, Dikran Melikian, Building a Family-Based Child Welfare System in Armenia. It's an in-depth look at Armenia's shifts from institutional childcare to family-based welfare. The piece explores the role of poverty, disability, stigma, and law, and the situation that we have in the country. The author examines recent positive reforms, remaining gaps, and what it will take to ensure every child grows up in a family. This is a subject
we've written about extensively
in the past, where the laws were just being formed, were being considered, and we talked about foster system for children in Armenia, how it works, how it doesn't work.
Yes,
and
basically deinstitutionalizing, these children whose parents can't take care of them, basically. And of course, we had our magazine issue, January on View, and sort of brings together all of the pieces that we did for that month. Why are you shaking your head?
Nothing.
Oh, okay. I thought he was like, okay.
Sorry.
No, but I love those things that we do, these on views, because it's a compilation of all the work that we've done. And sometimes we look back and say, how did we do this? And yet we do. And that's the kind of week we've had here in Armenia. Thank you for listening. Have a safe and peaceful weekend, and we'll be back again next week.